Welcome back. This is Michael Rickards, the Hall Forum. Delighted again, as I said, to have with us today a very distinguished guest, Bryan Lonegan, as a visiting associate professor of law at Seton Hall University. We were talking, Bryan, about the intense feeling that this new wave of immigration has really generated in the United States. But intense feeling against immigration is not new, is it?
Oh, no, not at all. You had the wave of immigrants in the 1840s, again, Irish and German immigrants. In the 1880s was a particularly intense period of time regarding Japanese and Chinese immigrants. And if you look at the Supreme Court cases that were written at that time upholding exclusionary rules and laws regarding Asian immigrants, you'll see some of the most racist language that you can find short of the Dred Scott decision. And of course, we've always gone through these cyclical periods of high immigration and then high concern about immigration. This is really nothing new, but within the period of my lifetime, I think the debate has gotten particularly nasty.
Let me reiterate some points that you made, because I don't think most of us are aware of them. First of all, people that are undocumented aliens, undocumented people that come into the United States, they are not a part of the Social Security system.
Well, actually, they do not derive any benefit from the Social Security system. However, there's a lot of studies that are showing that the undocumented workers are paying a considerable amount into our Social Security trust fund. In fact, many economists are claiming that the only way the trust fund can survive is through immigration and through the Social Security contributions made by both documented and undocumented workers. But while they're paying into the system, they're not able to.
How can you pay into the system and not be eligible to draw benefits from the system?
You'll have to ask Congress that question, but that's how they've written the statute.
And you also said that illegal immigrants are not eligible for Medicare, but they are eligible for Medicaid, which is basically a poverty-based system.
Well, they're not even eligible for Medicaid. They're eligible for emergency Medicaid, where so if somebody has an undocumented individual has cancer, they're not going to get treated. But if they break their arm, they'll get that kind of emergency treatment. And you know, the fact is that the last figure I saw is that runs us about $100 million a year, which is, you know, not chump change, but it's nothing compared to the daily cost of the war in Iraq. I would hate to think that our country has so lost its moral bearing that we would not want to set broken legs and broken arms of individuals seeking emergency medical care.
Now, children who are undocumented and who are themselves undocumented still can receive elementary and secondary education at the taxpayer's expense.
Yeah.
But they cannot go to college.
Right, because
they don't receive Pell money, essentially.
Right. It becomes prohibitively expensive. They can't obtain the financial aid that is so necessary for anyone to go to college these days. And that's another expense that I think legitimately people raise a concern about undocumented immigration, that it costs local communities in terms of education expenses. And it's true. But I've never known my country to ever deprive anyone or believe that it's okay to deprive any child of an education. I've had so many clients who were graduating high school and didn't even know they were undocumented until their parents had to tell them that they couldn't go to college. Are we really not willing to pay for the education of children? Again, I hope our country hasn't gone that so far into the moral hole that we're unwilling to do that.
Does this wave, really, of illegal immigration, does it impact or not on the employment opportunities available to other Americans? Especially, you see articles about how it's impacted on African Americans.
That is the big area of debate amongst economists. There was an economist named Borjas who a few years ago issued a study that said there is a downward pressure on American wages by immigrants. That study, however, has been sharply criticized by most other economists. An economist named Card has done several studies showing that actually the influx of undocumented and documented workers tends to increase production, which then in turn increases the labor prospects for American workers. About 70% of economists will go along with Card as opposed to Borjas. And so I think the evidence is, by and large, that it does help American workers. That being said, working on the ground with immigrants, there are certainly plenty of instances where we can see where undocumented workers impacted African Americans. New Orleans is a great example. I was recently at a conference where one guest worker was speaking against the guest worker program for New Orleans, oddly enough, because he noted that before his arrival, African American hotel employees were getting $25 an hour, and he was now coming in at $8 an hour. And now those African American employees have not been able to find their old jobs back. So I think that there are isolated instances where there's clearly a downward pressure.
Give us, in a minute or so we have left, give us your prescription as to what we should do about the immigration problems.
I think we have to start by addressing some of those concerns I raised before by reestablishing workplace workers' rights for all workers regardless of their status. I think we should eliminate the employer verification system. It's a failure. And putting employers in charge of immigration enforcement is like putting the fox in charge of the hen house. We need to strengthen workplace rights and enforcement so that all workers can get a fair wage. At the same time, we need to invest overseas in foreign economies to increase employment opportunities for the workers to the South.
Very good. I noticed that you're at the Center for Social Justice and at Seton Hall.
Yes, it's a wonderful place to work.
It's where students essentially do internships and get an opportunity to see real-life problems.
It's the clinical component of our law school where students are taken out of the classroom and they're actually given cases. I assign my students clients, and it's their responsibility to handle their cases. We have a wide variety of clinics, from working on the housing crisis to immigrant rights and asylum, and it's their one chance to actually meet a client.
It's I know a similar program where my daughter took at Tulane University in New Orleans, and there's a man free now who was incarcerated without cause, now free somewhere in New Orleans. So I understand what you're saying. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you very much for being here while we discussed the most important issue that many people are facing, and that's the question of immigration reform, and where do we go from here. I want to thank our guest for spending so much time explaining to us some of the nuances of a problem that affects not just 12 million people, but all of us. On behalf of the Hall Institute, I want to say thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.